if you are hypervigilant and you are hyper independent, that served a purpose for you at some point. Perfectionism worked for you at some point. You wouldn't be doing it if it did not work at some time. So we also have to acknowledge that it serves a purpose and we have to make sure that need is met. And then also untie it from this experience of being a mom.
Welcome to Worthy Mother Podcast. I'm your host, Emily Hardy, a mom of two on a mission to help moms everywhere feel less alone. This is not a parenting podcast. Instead, it's a space for pushing back against societal expectations of perfection and embracing self-compassion in your motherhood journey. Let's get into it. Hey, welcome to Worthy Mother Podcast. We talk a lot about how tendencies towards perfectionism and hyper-independence can create barriers in motherhood here on this podcast. And today we're going to take a look at what is sometimes behind those tendencies and how addressing trauma can actually be the way forward. And joining me for this conversation is Tisheila Justice, a trauma therapist who helps women break survival cycles, build healthier boundaries, and reconnect with their true selves beyond the roles they've been forced to carry. So, Tisheila, welcome to Worthy Mother Podcast.
Hey.
So excited to dive into this. Can you tell us about yourself and what really drew you to this work of helping moms heal from trauma while they're raising a family?
Yes. So I've actually been a clinician for about 15 years now, and I've worked with lots of different populations. And I think after a while, I really started to see how breaking cycles in the generation has become a huge focus of parenting when it comes to like the millennial generation and generations after. I was listening to your podcast and there was somebody who mentioned that they always have like an invisible chair in therapy left for the person's mom. And that really resonated with me because a lot of conversations can be surrounding childhood and how our needs were or were not met. And I do think that sometimes when we look back and we realize that people were parenting from survival instead of parenting from a place of connection and being relationally focused, because that's just not what was normal, that's where we see a lot of the issues kind of arise. So both personally and professionally, I feel like I've gotten to witness that motherhood can really wake up old wounds. It can amplify any past traumas, especially ones that were never addressed, but it can even wake up some that were. And sometimes that creates a whole new layer of pain. And when you are struggling with pain, it kind of reverts you back to maybe your most basic instinct and survival strategies that are not necessarily cultivating a connection with your child or a relationship focused thing. And it's more based on task. And I also had the opportunity of seeing that when we actually give moms support, understanding, and we equip them with tools to regulate their nervous system and show up the way they want to, we're really reshaping their experience as a mom, but also changing what a generation believes to be normal.
Yeah, it really is like so powerful when you think about how it extends beyond like the family unit, which is really important, like looking at the family unit and how it can shape the experiences within that and just of the mom. Like it can make the whole experience a lot better when you address the underlying stuff. But then it like ripples out into like, no, we're talking about generational change across all people, which is like mind-boggling a little bit.
And I think like we talk about not, because I think I always see people talking like, oh, people just complain about their parents, but our parents influence us in positive and negative ways. And there are people who function best in society because of the strong relationship they have with their parents, not because their parent was perfect, not because their parent gave them all these very specific things, but because their parent is available to them emotionally. And so if they have a shaken confidence, if they're struggling with anxiety, they feel like they can go to their parent and be supported. And so when we start changing what the goal is in parenting and recognizing it's about the connection, we can maybe give ourselves permission to turn off those survival instincts because you don't feel those. Those are things that you do that are based on task and accomplishments and things that are on a list. And that's not what relationships are.
Yeah, it's like a full different way to like think about what that is. I mean, I even like just am thinking about like the kids are to be seen, not heard, and how recently in our history that was like the norm. And that is speaking to that lack of connection. It's like the parenting was having the kids survive. And I think, you go back not too far in history. It's like survival in a very real sense was the
Yeah.
goal, because like people didn't actually necessarily survive. So
Hmm.
just that shift though is such a different way to look at what it means to be a parent and like what the goal is, like you said. And I love
Hmm.
the way you said that and just how clear it is. It's like, oh yeah, we don't have to be in that survival mode. We actually can focus on the connection, and the benefits of that, if we really look at it, are like
Right.
that's the good stuff.
And that's the part that I talk to moms about, that loving their child isn't the hard part. It's the
Yeah.
made up self imposed rules that they create for themselves that are hard. It's the expectation that they created for themselves to be a
Yeah.
quote unquote good mom that they're really battling and struggling with. It has nothing to do with their child.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that resonates. So we are going to be talking about trauma in this conversation because that underlies a lot of kind of what those expectations, where they come from. Can
Yeah.
you help us define what you see trauma as in the context of motherhood, and why maybe it's important to not just understand it as like these big events that are traumatic,
Yeah.
but also maybe those things we don't necessarily think of as trauma?
I am so happy that you asked this question because I think so rarely do we look at trauma as maybe smaller things that impact our daily life. We always look at these very big things. And I even hear moms say, well, you know, so and so had this happen, and that's so much worse. So I shouldn't even complain. But when I talk about trauma, and we can use other words, it can be extreme distress, whatever. But in motherhood, when I think of trauma and defining trauma, I really don't look at a catastrophic event. I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at chronic experiences that create overwhelm beyond our capacity and that leave an imprint on the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we respond. And that can include birth trauma, that can include medical complications, that can include lack of postpartum support, that can be the emotional weight of being constantly overstretched and overlooked and ignored and maybe unheard. And so when I strip it down, I always think of trauma as anything that leaves your body and your mind stuck in a survival response long after the event is gone. And when we think of motherhood, those responses can be hypervigilance, emotional numbing, irritability, feeling disconnected. If you look at content on social media or any platform that moms scroll through, it often is showing moms that are overwhelmed, moms that have mom rage, moms that have depression. And so we're naming the symptom of the issue that we're dealing with instead of naming it what it is, which is like a wound that we have or an experience that we're having that is traumatizing and difficult. We make it like it's the mom's personality trait, like it's a
Yeah.
deficit in the way that she's showing up. So, naming it mom rage when really that is my response to this extremely overwhelming expectation that I have for myself that I feel like is reinforced by society and the limited support that I feel like I have, and where I'm feeling unheard, and I'm constantly overwhelmed and anxious, and I don't know how to regulate my nervous system. And so I think understanding it in a full spectrum of trauma, that moms can release shame and
Yeah.
not necessarily feel like it's a deficit and a personal problem, and that it's a very real and valid issue that you're experiencing. And we have to find a way to turn that survival instinct off so you can actually enjoy life and enjoy mothering.
Yeah. I mean, I've never heard it said quite like that. You said something like the trauma is something that changes how we
Mhm.
think, feel, and respond.
Yes.
And I think for me, that kind of clicks something of like, yeah, no, it really is like it can be the smallest thing, but if it changes how we think about future situations and how we feel about ourselves in those situations, and then how
Mhm.
we are able to like respond, like, yeah, it has an impact, and it can have a negative impact. It can have an impact that
Great.
keeps us stuck in survival in these like ways of not being able to like actually move past something. And I know something that you talk about a lot is like coping responses.
Mhm.
So talking about like those symptoms, those coping responses we've developed, seeing how we have coping responses to traumas in our lives, big and small,
Mhm.
and how those serve a purpose, right? Like there's a reason they're there, but those do come along with us.
Yeah.
So something I've heard you talk about is how like in dealing with those, like when we try and address the mom rage, or we try and address the hyper independence or the perfectionism that's coming up from past traumas and it's a coping response. I've heard you say that a lot of times that's the like thing that moms are bringing to therapy is like
Yes.
this issue they're dealing with.
Yes.
But there's a different like way that you want to address that. Can you talk about what it means to like look beyond the coping response?
Yes. I think one of the things that I say to people when they first come, because they notice this is a problem, this specific
Yeah.
thing gets in my way. I can't make the anxiety go away, or I have trouble asking for help. It's impacting my relationship with my husband and my kids. When people come to session and they are sharing these symptoms that they're experiencing, and I say, well, what do you think the positive intention is from those behaviors? And it's not harm. Like, we don't get to choose when our survival instincts show up. We don't get to choose when they turn on or when they turn off. So if you are hyper vigilant and you are hyper independent, that served a purpose for you at some point. Perfectionism worked for you at some point. You wouldn't be doing it if it did not work at some time. So we also have to acknowledge that it serves a purpose, and we have to make sure that need is met.
Mm-hmm.
And then also untie it from this experience of being a mom. And an example that I would give is hypervigilance and hyperindependence probably helps when you're going through grad school. You're really on top of your work. You are a high achiever. You're getting good grades because you are prepared for this, and nothing's going to fall through the cracks because you have double checked and double checked. But that is your response to the anxiety you feel, because you don't want to drop the ball. You don't want to get a bad grade. And so you have developed these strategies to help you be successful in this setting. And the problem is, it has led to rewards and validation multiple times. And now in motherhood, well, there's no grade. There
Mm-hmm.
is no time that you can just be like, okay, so semester's over, I get a break. There's no way that that works. It's not the same. And so if you're applying all those same strategies to a totally different experience and it's not working, I see moms go through intense internal struggles because they feel like they're failing, and that impacts how they show up. So it starts to really change the way they view themselves, and like, I'm not a good mom, or this mom is better than me because she does this. I even had a client kind of talk about on the floor moms. I don't know if you ever heard that term, and it's not how she identifies herself, but
Yeah.
everything you see another mom doing, you start to really compare yourself to them, and you're stuck still being anxious because the strategy you've always used to ease your anxiety isn't working, but you keep trying it because it's the only strategy you know. And so I am like, let's bring awareness to the anxiety you feel. What are you actually anxious about? And a lot of times we uncover some very core beliefs that lie underneath there that are tied to maybe some unmet needs that they're applying to the situation. So if they were a child that didn't get their needs met, they are overly trying to meet their child's needs. They're actually making up needs that their child's not even expressing, and they're responding to that. So you're over functioning and you're in overdrive about a situation that doesn't actually exist right now. But what we need to acknowledge is that you are anxious. So what else can we do for that anxiety instead of using this strategy that is not applicable? And so just helping them see the positive intention behind those things that they feel shame about, have compassion for it, and understand how it is helpful in certain situations.
Yeah.
And maybe we just don't need it in this one. So there's nothing wrong with you. You're not failing as a mom. This is not a personal characteristic that you need to change. And this is not a deficit in your ability to cope. You are in the most stressful, exposed version of yourself that you have been in a long time. And when we are that exposed, we revert back to the strategy that worked best for us instinctually and when we were younger, and it's kind of automated.
Yeah, there's such a level of like self-awareness, and I always like to talk about self-awareness like in the context.
Mhm.
You have to like be aware of what's going on and the context that you're currently existing in. And I think just the way you've explained that, it's like it does allow you to release so much of the shame when you understand that like, okay, that actually probably was a good strategy in certain
Mhm.
contexts. And maybe because of really shitty circumstances, or maybe not, maybe grad
Yeah.
school, I like developed these traits and it's actually like a really positive thing. And this will continue to serve me into other areas
Right.
of my life. But in this context, being like so on top of it and like feeling like I need to check all the boxes and hit every mark when there's not boxes to check. There's
Right.
not a
You made
mark
the
to hit.
boxes.
Yeah, like it's like okay, so that strategy can't work here, but if you don't stop and understand like, oh, I'm working in a I'm using strategies from a different context here. You don't even
Is it?
stop to recognize that because like you said, like there is so much going on. We are so exposed. We are just like surviving sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Like it's trying to figure out what works. Yeah, just I mean that kind of way of looking at it feels so much different than like I'm bringing perfectionism along with me and
Right.
like that sucks too.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily a choice. It's
Yeah.
a lot of ways things are reinforced that you single-handedly are responsible for the health and well-being of your child. Even if you have a great support system and a partner and all those things, you're the mom. And so teacher wants to talk to you, doctor wants to talk to you, that there are reinforcements that you are supposed to be doing these things. And
Yeah.
if your value is in, I really want to have a great relationship with my child when they're older, and I want to be able to enjoy this and I want to have fun, then we have to figure out what boxes you created for yourself because you're checking these boxes and clearly they are not serving you and they don't actually make you feel good. And so we have to
Oh,
redefine
yeah.
motherhood based on what you want and what your values are in this season of life.
Yeah, wow. It's like it really is the zooming out at the of the values and like the
Mhm.
whole goal you have and how that will change the way that you approach a conversation with the teacher. If
Yes.
that's not the like if your child being perfect and you being the perfect mom having a perfect child isn't the goal any longer because you stopped and looked at like, wait, is that my goal? Is that like what I
Hmm.
want? Oh, wait, that's actually not the thing that's super important to me. It's building this relationship, being there for my child, having them know that I'm someone to go to. Wow, that like totally shifts the way you're going to address that conversation.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I want to talk a little bit about some of these specific like
Hmm.
coping strategies and tendencies. Let's start with perfectionism.
My favorite.
Why? I know it's, I feel like, us millennials, it's like a lot of millennials and, people who are currently raising kids right now, like perfectionism has always been a part of our lives
Yeah.
and continues to show up while we're raising kids. Why is it such a common coping mechanism for moms with, these histories and what do those histories look like? And then how like does it show up in our day to day? Because I think
Mm.
sometimes, I can think about as a child like the way perfectionism showed up, but it's different now.
Yeah.
But I want to like be able to identify that, oh, that's the same thing coming up.
Right. And it just looks different and it's a little bit more covert and it's not as obvious. But I have definitely found that perfectionism starts very early on, even in the pregnancy, just as far as the way that people are researching. Like there are self-imposed rules that are kind of determined and they are constantly like, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to deliver. This is how I'm exclusively breastfeeding or I'm going to, they'll set these expectations. And a significant amount of times that I am working with moms is they had an expectation that was not achievable and was not realistic. And because they had set that expectation, and maybe in the past they would set an expectation and they would excel and they would accomplish it and they would do it. And those are for short term goals. Perfectionism doesn't exist in a long term relationship. And motherhood's not just a goal, it's a relationship. And you can't have all these list of expectations for yourself as you are getting to know a new person. And I don't mean getting to know your baby or your child only. I mean, you're getting to
Yeah.
know yourself as a mom because all of your love languages change, all of your interests might change. A lot of things about yourself may change with all this exposing of layers of you that maybe you forgot about. And some of the things that I definitely notice come up from people who are perfectionists in motherhood is that they are compensating for something already. They believe there's something that they need to compensate for, whether they are conscious about that or not. So a lot of times is I know what I did not have, and I don't want my child to have
Mhm.
that. So I am responding to every need that I possibly had that was missed so that my child doesn't ever feel the negative feeling that I felt. So it's protection. It is also like an intention of I care about being good at this. So I always recognize with people like your intention behind this is that you care about being a good mom. And that's great. But let's talk about what a good mom actually means to you. Because does a good mom mean that you have all food groups on every single plate for lunch and dinner and snack? Does being a good mom mean that your child never ever cries or doesn't have any problem? Does being a good mom mean that you are never experiencing any quote unquote negative emotion, that you're always happy and go lucky and everything is fine? Because no person would be a good mom and if those were the requirements. But if you have these self-imposed rules and you give yourself no flexibility outside of them, and it's a very rigid belief that like I should exclusively breastfeed for 3 years. There is nothing wrong with deciding that that's something that you would like to do, but you also have to allow flexibility in that because there's lots of reasons that that might not work for you or for your child. And
Yeah.
if the goal was set that these are the things and I can't do these things, there's new ways that they want to regain control. And perfectionism kind of perpetuates that. So it makes up new rules so that you can actually feel like you're achieving them. And I genuinely see it coming from a place of good intention, but anxiety,
Yeah.
old wounds, and unrealistic expectations that have been set for themselves that had no flexibility in the possibility of what could happen.
Yeah. Yeah, that need for control in a situation that you actually can't control. Like
I
there
mean,
might be aspects of it that you feel like you have control where you're like, well, I can breastfeed
mhm.
exclusively because I did all the research and I'm committed and all these things. And it's like, yeah, maybe like there's hurdles and you do it and
Yeah.
you're like, wow, I gained control of it. But like there's factors in there that like you actually have no control over. And
At all.
so you can see how like the goal of that being control and being like to ease that anxiety,
Hmm.
but the results of it when you're not able to do that, the results, it's not just like, oh, I don't have control because you weren't going to anyway,
Right.
but it's like now I'm failing too. And how
Hmm. I'm a bad mom.
that's not the goal. That we're not trying to like set bars for ourselves so we can fail. That's not the goal.
Right.
But it's what ends up happening.
And then what happens when you are trying to reach a goal that's not attainable? You can't be present in other aspects of your relationships with your
Yeah.
friends, with your family, with your significant other, with your child, because you're ruminating about this failure
Yeah.
and this thing you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I mean, I think probably most of us can relate to that in some aspects of motherhood because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of us bring those kind of tendencies right along with us into motherhood. Another big one is hyperindependence and this idea of like, I can and should be able to do it all by myself and resisting asking for help, accepting help, all of that.
Yeah.
What is often behind that and how can that harm us in motherhood?
And so much of it is, I actually don't contribute this all to self-imposed beliefs because I do think
Yeah,
culturally that is reinforced in so many
totally.
ways. And I also wonder if the breakdown of the village that we're supposed to have, the way it's basically turned into social media competition instead, and you see all
Mm-hmm.
these other people that are able to do it. And so it seems like
Yeah,
a personal failure if you're not. But I'm the mom. I should be able to do this. I should be able to execute this. And kind of society has also said, like, it's okay if dads go back to work like the next day. It's fine. It's fine. They're not needed there.
yeah,
But what I see in a lot of my clients is that they were very independent anyway. They were independent prior to becoming a mom. They
yeah,
had great relationships. They had their independence within their romantic relationships and the dynamics of those relationships, no one needed to help them because they always figured it out. They were the strong friend. They were the self-sufficient person. They're the person that everyone calls when they need something. And so this is a new place for them to be where they actually are needing people. And a way that they have never needed it before because it's more emotionally raw. It's more vulnerable than they're used to. And so they don't even feel comfortable asking for help. And it also feels like a personal failure. So, and their partner is not used to even needing to help because we were
Yeah.
high achieving, functioning independently while we were together. Nothing's new. But it also was hard to let go of this identity trait that maybe is traced back to like a survival instinct instead or a trauma response. But now that it's not yielding great results, it's a problem. But before it was
Yeah.
fine. And I'm in sessions with people hearing them recognize I need something. I need a lot more than what I'm getting now. And I don't even know how someone could help me. And
Yeah.
what they're a lot of my clients who definitely have had childhood trauma where maybe they don't have the best connections and attachment to their parents and they never felt nurtured or protected by their parents. They don't have their mom coming to help them. They don't have that extended family that would normally step in. And so they're more isolated and really remembering, oh, like, oh, so and so had their mom come and stay with them for a month. And I couldn't even imagine having my mom stay with me for a month and that being helpful. That would be very difficult for me. That would actually make me feel worse. But I also want someone to come and nurture me and take care of me and protect me and reassure me, even though I've never needed that before. And I don't know how to ask someone for that.
Yeah.
And so I also do postpartum intensive couples work. And I do it before while they're pregnant as well, but it is very impactful postpartum because, okay, so we are new people overnight. the
Yeah.
these things that used to work don't work now. And we shouldn't be dealing with it in isolation. And it takes a long time to break down that strong identity that someone has held on to and admit I need help and ask for help, but then also identify what kind of help it is that I need. And I usually help people kind of identify those needs because it may not be just for you to do the dishes. It might be, I just need someone to reassure me that I'm good at this. I just need some verbal affirmations, and that's not my normal love language, but I need it really, really bad right now. And so I feel like it's very important to reassess what our needs are now
Yeah.
consistently because this is a level of growth that you're not used to and you can't be a super mom or superhero. We should never even ask anyone to be because it's not a thing we were ever supposed to be doing alone. And
Yeah.
I don't think they give any moms medals for burning themselves out, self-abandoning and getting it perfect.
Yeah. Yes to all of that. There's two pieces of that are just sticking out to me. The one is how so often we relate these things to our identity,
Mm-hmm.
and yet oftentimes it's coping. It's a strategy that was created. And I think that is a complicated thing. And I imagine as a therapist, like working through that is probably very complicated with people when somebody takes that on as part of their identity and then builds like their life has kind of gone forward with that as part of their identity. It
Yeah.
actually does become part of your identity because our identity is like how we identify. And so the kind of pulling apart of that can't be easy. Like
Right.
there's a lot in there. It's not just dealing with what's underlying that. It's not just dealing with the needs. It's also like letting go of a part of our identity in a time where there's already so much change with our
Mm-hmm.
identities as moms. I also think it's important to call out what you said there about the context of like our society perpetuating these messages, but also the fact that there's other factors in our ability to get that help and
Yeah.
to rely on other people. And for some people, that may be easier. And for others, it may be like actually you have to get really, really creative in like
Mm-hmm.
who do you ask for help? Where do you rely on people? And how like it becomes almost another form of survival of like I have to solve this problem of needing help. And so if you just rely on the I can do it all myself,
Mm-hmm.
like that may be the answer you have, right? That may be
Yeah.
what feels like the only answer. And so I think acknowledging like how complex it is and recognizing that in the way you answered that is so important because again, it's like not so personal. It's like,
Right.
okay, that doesn't mean you can do it all alone. It doesn't mean that if you don't have the help, you can do it all alone. That's not it at all, but just
Mhm.
kind of releasing some of the guilt and shame around like not being able to do it all by yourself and struggling with that. It's like
For
yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Like you
And I
can't do
feel
it
like
all.
every person that, or every client I've had that is hyper independent, hyper vigilant, perfectionist, they honestly do want to rest, but they
Yeah.
don't think things would be okay if they did. So
Yeah.
when you're doing it because you feel like it's a need, that's not your identity.
Yeah.
That's not what you'd be doing for fun if everything was fine. You feel like there is no other choice. And if you don't respond in this way, bad things could occur or happen or go
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah. I'm curious, you've talked some about like what you kind of address with moms who may be facing these things and how you kind of get into the underlying patterns or beliefs that are there.
Hmm.
When these old coping responses come up, like in the moment, what tools can help moms regulate their nervous systems and come back to a place of like seeing it for what it is?
Yeah. I am actually a huge proponent for movement. I used to work in the federal government and I worked in a program called Whole Health, and it was to look at people as whole people. And there's all these aspects of their life that has to be nurtured for them to be whole and to be functioning optimally, not just functioning, but optimally. And so when I am building our toolkits for emotional and nervous system regulation, I always have movement as a main part because sometimes if you trained your brain to be very quick with those intrusive negative thoughts, if you don't challenge them often, so they're very fast, you don't even really have to think about it, they're hard to stop. And so doing something in the body that kind of takes your brain power away, so it's not just focusing and hyperfixating on these thoughts that you're having, is really beneficial. And some of the things that I utilize for that, I'm like, as easy as possible. Dance, do a dance party. My kids, the two things that they say that I do the most is sing and dance. And that is mostly because I'm regulating. They don't know, but I'm regulating. So I'm like, dance party time, guys. So I have to move my body, I have to move around. And that's just the most simplest access point. But then there's other tools that I always recommend people have in their toolbox. Like I always think that everyone should have something associated with relaxation that represents all five senses. So a certain smell, a certain thing that you touch. I don't care if you go to Joanne Fabrics and just get a sample of a fabric that feels nice, but it is going to be part of your routine for regulating. Something that you hear, maybe a specific song. I think because a lot of wounds are opening from the past, that I always tell people, like, I'm like, let's go for nostalgia. Let's go for music from this time period, music from that time period. And, you can listen to it in 8D hertz because that is something that regulates your nervous system, especially if you have headphones on. It just really feels like the music is surrounding you and it's very beneficial. But then I also think that emotional freedom tapping, or I think also known as
Mm-hmm.
emotional freedom technique, is like tapping the acupressure points and saying affirmations. So, not just trying to verbally reassure yourself, but you make yourself present because you are physically doing something in your body that makes you stay present. Because what I find is a lot of times when we're off on our anxious thoughts, we're not present anymore. We floated
Yeah.
away to a different dark place, and we need to learn how to be more present because presence is required for connection. I also used to, in that program in the government, I used to do hypnotherapy and biofeedback. And I found those things to be really helpful because for people who can't do mindfulness and they have a hard time meditating, or that sounds like something that's just crazy to them, biofeedback is a device that you can wear. And as you're looking at the screen, it's telling you when to breathe, it's telling you when to do certain things. So you are just following what it tells you to do. And in real time, it gives you feedback on how your body is responding to this technique. So
Yeah.
instead of just going based on what it emotionally feels like, you're going off of physically what you see. Oh, I'm in the red. I need to adjust my breathing. Oh, I'm in the green. I'm doing good. This is what it feels like when my body is regulated, when my nervous system is calming, my heart rate is in coherence, which is a regulated place to be, I am teaching my body what it feels like to be safe, calm, and stable. And
Yeah.
I've never experienced that. Then how would I even know that this is what it feels like? And I always tell people what you think is relaxation and what actual coherence and regulation feels like might not be the same because you've probably never truly been regulated. You were just easing anxiety and then you get a little dopamine hit and now you feel good. And that's not the same as being regulated. And
Yeah.
so I have all these body involvement tools, but also things outside of you that it's not just you having the willpower to sit down and try to meditate or something because that's hard. And sometimes you're not going to be able to do that. But I like to have a lot of things in the toolkit that nurtures all sorts of parts of you. I don't care if you used to love horses as a kid and now once a week or once a month you go to a horse riding class because we're going to
Yeah.
nurture that inner child that has some needs that need to be met so that you can show up and be the best version of yourself and meet your child's needs. So I come up with like lots of strategies that's going to help build a stable version of you and regulate all the needs that are triggered.
I love that. And I love kind of just getting into the idea of the fact that, yes, there's things we can address up here in our brains. Like, there are definitely plenty of things. And a lot of it is really attacking and understanding like our pasts and what is causing different things and addressing those underlying things. But there's so much of it too that's like learning to connect with our body and thinking about presence in that way of like being in our bodies and how sometimes I hate to use the word like cheat, but it's like a little bit of a cheat of like, let's go straight to the body and learn it there first, or at least like get to a place where we're like tapping into that so that we can then address the other things from an actual regulated place. Because like you said, like I've never really heard someone say it that way, but like a lot of us haven't experienced that true relaxation. And you said that, it made me think of, I used to be an elementary school teacher and we had I think it's called the zones of regulation is what they called this particular emotional learning tool, but it was talking about like, blue is kind of down, like so being sad or tired
Mm-hmm.
or even like maybe bored. Green was like the neutral zone where you're like ready to learn, you're ready to go, and it's regulated. And then there's yellow, which can be anxious, but it can also be happy. And then there's red, that's more like the big feelings, anger,
Mm-hmm.
and excitement. Like it's these big feelings. You're not regulated. When you're super excited and hyped up, you're like definitely not regulated. It's not a bad thing, but
Right.
you're not regulated. So just the way you explained that of thinking about like, yes, sometimes you can do the thing and get the dopamine hit. So you're like, oh, I'm good and
Mm-hmm.
regulated. But that's not necessarily that neutral place to like act from. There's so many ways to like think about regulation
So
and
many.
think about presence. And it's not that we have to be like right there present all the time, but sometimes we don't even know what that feels like to be present. And so like
Mm-hmm.
going to the basics of the physicality of it is so important. And I think it's so cool that you and so many mental health practitioners are addressing mental health and healing from all the different angles because it's the best
Yeah.
way to do it. Like,
And I feel like
it's,
because I talk so much about trauma responses and survival instincts and how they served a purpose at one point and they're not always helpful in every situation, I always feel like I need to have several things in your toolbox because they're not going to all be
yeah.
applicable all the time. So I'm not going to
Yeah.
say, oh my gosh, like my kid is really sick and we had to take him to the hospital. I'm not going to say, put your biofeedback device on and let's regulate because we also have to get comfortable that there's going to be uncomfortable emotions and some things that we really do have to
Yeah.
process. And that is okay too. But let's just make this toolbox wide, big, and stacked with several options so that you can utilize. Because the problem that we're here talking about is something that solved a problem for you before.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you can't just not do anything.
Yeah.
We have to we will respond to it. We will respond to whatever the situation is. So having new tools to use as the response instead of the
Yeah.
automatic this is what I've always done response is so
Right.
key.
And so many times I know people work out and stuff and they'll be like working out used to be my release. And
Yeah.
now even as a mom, I try to work out and it just doesn't work. And I'm just like, because we have to have more than just one thing as our plan.
Yeah. Yeah. For the moms who might recognize themselves in everything that we've talked about, but feel kind of maybe overwhelmed by addressing, because we are talking about a lot of things,
Mhm.
right? Where would you say is the best place to start?
That is such a good question. I typically recognize that it is hard to start internally. And that's where, like, a lot of
Yeah.
times people are like, yeah, buy the workbook or start journaling, or it is hard for a mom to start internally because I think, again, we also are conditioned a little bit for self abandonment. And so I think that I don't know if you know a lot about ADHD, but I know that they'll talk about if you want to get a task done, you need somebody to mirror with you and like have them do it with you. And so I genuinely think it starts with community. It starts with
Yeah.
like reaching out to someone else and being a part of something, whether that's with your therapist or you joined a mom group or you are meeting other people in some avenue. And that is one of the hardest things for moms to do because it's not necessarily a priority. But I do
Yeah.
think that it is the most beneficial thing because you can maybe break down some of the rules that you set for yourself and recognize, like, oh, we're all doing this different, and that's totally fine. And
Yeah.
also, I should give myself permission to be supported and have a relationship. And so I know that there's like a lot of doula centers that will offer groups that are not even just for people who have delivered with them, but they just are connecting moms together. But I also think there's some very nice benefits in thinking of something that is of interest to you and just going to do that and finding people there. So I've had people join beekeeping classes, which I did not know was a thing, but they had an interest in it and they found people that they resonate with. They've joined pottery classes, they've done horseback riding. I want you to nurture the things that are important to you, and your people will be there because I want to reinforce that self abandonment is not the key to being a good mom and something that pulls you out of that. And if you don't have a ton of options and you feel like therapy is the only way, then I definitely recommend therapy. And if there's even groups in your area that is run by a clinician, I definitely encourage people to participate in that. But there are so many options that I feel like building the community or having a person that you connect with is one of the best parts and the most important parts that will maybe get you to be a little bit more confident in going internal and dealing with some of the internal thoughts that are coming up.
Yeah. I think that's like, that makes so much sense.
And I know so many moms that are like, oh, I wasn't going to come to therapy, but then I met this girl and she told me. And so just having somebody see you, so having somebody
Yeah.
hear you changes the way that you see you and that you hear you.
I mean, it kind of comes back to why I have this podcast and why I want to have these conversations. It's just the like normalization of like, there's a lot of different normal ways to exist in motherhood. Like,
Mhm.
it can look a lot of different ways. And we can also address things. Like, we can also address our own personal struggles, those internal things. And so we have to be talking about it, though, to even recognize like what it is that we don't have to like just be
Yeah.
dealing with. Like, we can address these things when you're in connection with other moms, and yeah, you have that kind of mirror
Mhm.
of like, oh, okay, I can go there. I can go to this place of understanding why I'm feeling guilty all the time, or I can go to this place of recognizing that maybe not getting any time for myself
Mhm.
is something to address. Like,
And just because I was
it's
doing this doesn't mean I am this and I always have to be
yes.
this.
Yeah, it's so important. So, the way that I love wrapping up these conversations is with a little bit of a conversation on self care,
Mhm.
because, as we've said, like self abandonment is pretty typical in motherhood. There's
Yeah.
a lot outside of us taking our attention. And it's also really important that we are focused on getting our needs met, like we've discussed here. And so I would love to know like how you get your needs met, how you take care of yourself, and just anything from that that you would give as advice for other moms to just make sure they are also regularly taking care of themselves.
Yes. I feel like I have, over the years built up a pretty good strategy. Obviously, COVID and, we're in unprecedented times, I feel like really shifted right away, maybe ideas that I had about what I wanted to look like and what I wanted my family to be like. But something that I really take a lot of time in doing post COVID, I travel frequently with my children. And even if it's like throughout the state of Florida where we live, or we are going to really big places, because I remember feeling isolated, feeling stuck, and wanting to experience things with them. And for me, what I have found as a mom is that we always put ourselves in a position that we are in charge. Like, well, we are because we're raising people and we're the ones that know what to do. But I also like to dabble in experiences with my children that puts us on an even playing field. Like we're all doing this for the first time together. So I'm not going to be an expert, and that's okay. And you might even be better than me, and you will be able to teach me. And that changes our connection a little bit. So I'm actively and intentionally going out of my way to create opportunities where we are all doing something new together. And that's something that I feel like has really nurtured some of my values and helped me grow personally without feeling like I already needed to be the expert beforehand. Because I'm an anti-perfectionist these days. And because I'm trying not to be that, I'm putting myself in situations where it's not possible. And then I'm
Oh,
also trying to be a lot more emotionally focused. So I make sure to take care of myself when I'm feeling anxious or dysregulated, that I set up time to meet with my girlfriends and we do stuff together. Or I'm coloring, drawing, trying to do something creativity, something that's linked to creativity. I'm not a creative person, but I feel like everyone can find something that opens that part of their brain, gives them a state of flow where they can refuel, and the type of activities that just you feel passionate and excited about. I want you to like make time for that.
yeah.
And, I also definitely like to, I'm terrible at journaling. I know as a therapist, it's so bad to say that. I'm terrible at journaling, but I definitely am much better at affirmations and doing physical things. So I will definitely do some tapping. I will do some movements. Yoga and working out are some good outlets for me. And that's where I'm like, okay, I can be mindful in this moment by doing this physical activity. I actually am a huge, this is the last thing I'll say. I really, really love sensory deprivation. That is one of my
Oh,
favorite things as a mom that maybe when I was younger I would not have loved, but as an overwhelmed, overstimulated mom, being able to turn off senses and actually just be in silence, it is so rejuvenating. And I even tell people it doesn't have to be like at one of those studios that are super expensive. You can close the door, you can lay in your bed, you can put a blindfold on, you can float in the pool and just not acknowledge anything and make sure your ears are closed. There's ways to create that sensation, but that is something that has been very beneficial for the overstimulated mom.
yeah. I crave that often. So I love all the different responses you gave there. I think that idea of like forcing yourself into situations where you aren't going to know what's going on, and like that's to be expected. Like you're
Mhm.
traveling and you're somewhere where you don't know the culture, you don't know the way to get to this place you're going, like all those things. That's such an interesting way to kind of address perfectionism
Yeah.
and be like, I'm actually putting myself in situations where that won't be my expectation because like it's not the expectation in this situation. And
Yeah.
so it takes that pressure away. And like I just get to be and my kids get to see me lost and experiencing this. And like how cool that is. I'm thinking my kids are going to a dual immersion school. So well, my oldest like speaks some Spanish. So I'm like, oh, how cool would it be to go to a situation where like he can communicate better than I can? Like that'd be really
Yeah.
neat.
That would be really cool.
Yeah. Love all of that. I love this conversation. So many great things. We really got into it. Like
Mhm.
and there's so much more. I love what you're doing with your work and the conversations you're having, and I'm just so grateful that you're here with us. Where can listeners find you, and is there really anything they should be keeping an eye out for? Anything they can benefit from with you?
Yes. So I am on Instagram under Growth and Wellness MHC. I'm also on TikTok under Tisheila Justice. I do have a website and I have a newsletter and a blog because I'm just passionate about several aspects and I like to share a lot of this information and a lot of these tools. But I am actually working on a couple of things like a workbook that people can utilize to kind of enhance their relationship. And that's something to fight against the hyper independence so that it's not me having to figure out what I need in order for you to meet my need, but for us to like grow together and recognize our roles as parents and that, the dynamic of I'm the mom, so I have to tell you as the dad what to do. And instead, it's like, no, we both became parents today, and we're going to start today working towards this together so we can show up for each other. So I'm working on some things like that. And I also am putting together my own little community so that moms can connect. And it's free and it's through one of our doula centers that's local in Tampa. And so it's just mostly because I want us to be able to get together and create that community and, try new things together. And so I hope to have a lot more things kind of growing as the year goes on, but that is what I have currently. And you can find me on those two platforms. And my website is Growth and Wellness MHC. So I'll put updates for things on there as well.
Love it. So definitely follow along. Lots coming. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for just sharing so much and so deeply. It really
Thank you.
What an impactful conversation.
Yes. Thank you so much. This is such a great
Yes.
podcast, and I had such a good time.
And thank you all for tuning in. You are worthy, Mama.